Hey everybody, I'm back today with Rich Ahlers. He is a health expert and the creator of Vital Habits. And last time we had a great conversation where we touched upon a bunch of pillars of health that are really essential for being healthy and living your best life. But we unfortunately didn't get to cover everything that I would have liked to. And just so happens that Rich recently released an ebook about stress and anxiety, which lines up really well with some of the remaining pillars of health that we didn't get to talk about. So I would love to jump into that today. Hey, Rich, how you doing?
Good, Rob. Awesome to be back. And yeah, we did cover a lot last time, so I'm excited we get to hit this topic because this one is like for me is kind of the foundation of everything that sparks off of that for Vital Habits, right? It's like really stress, chronic stress, and anxiety that kind of sparked all this for me to do. So stoked to get into this with you today.
Yeah, I'm really happy we're going to do a dedicated episode on this topic because I think it's something that touches so many people and it's very relatable. And I think this will be a great help to a lot of people. So, just to start off with, stress and anxiety, is there a difference between the two? Let's start by defining what stress and anxiety actually is.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's let's take stress first. So stress has two different components, and some people will say there's three, but because there's eustress, which is a whole other thing. But there's stress and chronic stress. Now, stress, it's a normal thing. We're supposed to get stressed at times because stress creates motivation. It creates focus. It creates be able to get tasks done. So normal stress is good. It's what would be considered acute, short durations. Then there's chronic stress, which is more about what we're going to probably talk about today. And that's when you kind of, if you ever have like a record player playing and you hear the needle just kind of keep like jittering the record. I'm dating myself here with a record player, but it reminds me of that, right? Where it's like the loop just keeps looping. It doesn't connect to the next line. So you get this like constant cycle or even like hamster wheel where the chronic stress cycle is constantly running, or the stress cycle is constantly running, and you end up in a chronic state where you're perpetually recreating the stress over and over and over again because you're not breaking out of the cycle. And that's where you start to see things happen to part two, which is things like anxiety, depression, burnout, adrenal fatigue, brain fog, cognitive dysfunction, autoimmune condition. Like you could just go down the cascade of diseases that are all created from chronic stress.
So okay, so chronic stress is about like just kind of re-experiencing the things that are stressing you out, like falling into that like you said, hamster wheel of just repeating it. So it starts as a mental thing, but there's a tremendous number of physical effects that can come from that. So what are some of those?
Yeah, well, actually, it could be physical or mental, to be honest with you. So, like I've talked about this before, I think with Luke and maybe with you and other
Mhm.
people, is we kind of gloss over the fitness industry. And like there's a lot on social media, probably because I follow stuff that's healthy and I get this thing sent to me. But I want people to realize that physical stress, so beating on your body too much, using it too much, the allostatic load of like doing things for extended periods of time and how much can also create chronic stress. And so if you're someone that works out 2, 3, 4 times a day, you're doing a lot of things that push you, that and you're doing that daily to get, let's say, to be at 5% body fat, right, or something like that, and you're fasting and you're cold plunging and you're getting in the sauna and you're running 4 miles, like this is also chronic stress on the body, and the body's chemical biological process will also change. So it's
Okay.
physical and mental, and either one of them could be the act of insult, or both, to be honest.
Okay, so it works both ways. I feel like it's much less common probably for the average person to experience that type of physical stress from, let's say, overtraining or really running your body down. Although, you know, busy lifestyles, running around a lot, not sleeping properly, not eating well, I'm sure that kind of plays into it too,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. So if you're a workaholic, I fell into that category for many
Hmm.
years. If you're a workaholic, or you're taking on too many things, right? Like you're doing your job, and then you're parenting, and then you have a side hustle, and then you do a community thing. You're All these things are keeping you chronically stressed, right? Because you're not pausing for recovery. You're not taking a break to meditate or sleeping 8 hours or um, pulling away from devices or things that keep making you stressed, right? Elevating your heart rate, getting you to get shallow breathing. And these all perpetually will create disease over time. Uh, Good thing is that the human body is pretty resilient. So you see people end up getting sick in their primarily in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, and on. And people will say, "Well, I don't know what's happening to me," and they don't think back to like all the years that built up to that moment in time.
Right.
But yeah, I think I answered it right.
Yeah, yeah, you did. What would, in your opinion, what is uh the number one remedy for stress, if you can pinpoint like a top one?
I think it's collective, to be honest. But I think if I was to say like, if you wanted to hack it real quick, your breath. So the breathing is the most accessible, fast way to change your autonomic function and put yourself into what's considered parasympathetic. Sympathetic is stress, parasympathetic is rest. So just by breathing through your nose and exhaling through your mouth, you're engaging your vagus nerve, which helps engage your parasympathetic state, which makes you calm down. So essentially, this is why people see things like box breath become popular or 4-7-8 breath. These are all things from yogic practices, qigong practices, Eastern type of modalities that have been modernized for the Western world, right? So they're using them in cold plunges and things like that. But the breath is the way to tap into that. And what I found through my own martial arts practice is the open mouth exhalation is really key, because when you open mouth exhale, like it's almost like sighing, and sighing is the same type of mechanism. So when we, it actually disengages fight or flight patterns. It makes you relax. So the inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth is the same thing. It's the same principle. So that to me is one of the fastest ways people can get them out of a fight or flight or chronic stress state. You have to train it, and you have to do it whenever you catch yourself as best you can, so that you can keep training the body to go back into that state. And the
Okay,
more you
so
do it, the easier it is, right?
that's a good short-term solution for like if you're feeling stressed in the moment, take some breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, and that'll
I would
help
say
things.
do it for 3 to 5 minutes, and you'll find yourself feeling completely different, very relaxed.
I'm curious to know what your opinion is about anxiety medication, because that, I know people in my life who take anxiety medication, and um, I'm sure that there are some benefits. Uh, Me personally, I don't see it as a solution, but more of like a band-aid for a problem.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what you think about it.
Yeah, this is sensitive for me, because, well, let me start from the beginning. I think what's happened in this world, I think I wrote about this recently too, is that medications were designed, kind of what you said, as a band-aid. They were designed to get you off the edge. If you're having a health concern or symptoms, right? Because remember, medication on any front is for symptom management. It's not for curing. So the problem is that medications were designed to get people off the edge so they could do the work to reinstate homeostasis. The problem is, over the last 20 years, we have fast-tracked medications and prioritize them to the point where people, if they have the smallest ailment, they're immediately reaching for medication. So much so that patients are becoming the advocate of medication, not even just physicians. People are going, I want this. Why do you want this? I saw it on TV. I saw it in an ad. I know this is good for so-and-so. My friend so-and-so takes this. And so they're using that thinking it's a way to cure themselves. So that's the biggest problem, I think, with medicinal use right now. The other thing is that our society has become obsessed with escaping without the work. And medication is the exact excuse for that. So it's like, I don't want to fix my diet. I don't want to exercise more. I don't want to stop drinking or smoking or whatever is causing my problems or my traumas and deal with them. I'll just take the pill so I don't have to do any work. Because the work is much more, when they look at the two options, the work is so overwhelming that they'd rather just take a shortcut. their perceived shortcut to resolution. The issue is the more that you do that, especially in mental health, I mean, everything, but mental health especially, if you don't deal with the root causes of these things, they're going to perpetuate and they're going to compound. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the medication side. But if you're constantly medicating, you're muting feelings, you're not addressing your thoughts or subconscious belief systems, and you're ignoring it. So what happens is those issues stack up to the point where it flips the lever, and now you're in a chronic illness, irreversible situation. You're compromised maybe for life, right? So it's a very slippery slope. So that's like my perspective on it. I think medication has its utility. I think medication is extremely overused, especially in mental health. So now I'll kind of get into that part of it because I was put on an anti-anxiety medication many years ago, an SSRI, because at the time I was going through a bunch of crap in my life, and I didn't know any different. I was like, hey, I got all these things going on. Like, what do I do? And the doctor, who wasn't even a physician that would prescribe, not a psychiatrist, right? Or a psychologist, I think prescribes them. But she was like a regular doctor, and she said, oh, you should go on this. And it was like a low dose, and I'm like, okay. Had no idea. I'm following her orders. But fast forward like several years, there was no management of the medication. There was no dose titration. There was no check-in. And I started to like question, like, why am I on this thing? Like, I'm not even having issue. Like, no one's checked. What's going on? Like, so I found, of course, fast forward, I figured out how to get off these things, and I had someone help me get off like the dose. It wasn't a severe dose, but like it helped me get off. And so here's what I kind of uncovered about like my experience and Xanax and all these other types of prescriptions is that number one, long-term use of these medications has not been studied. And I find that to be a big problem because while acutely they may work, what are they doing to the body long-term? What are they doing to the neurochemistry long-term? What are they doing to the gut that impacts neurotransmission development long-term? What are they doing to possibly degrade the brain, right? Like, what's happening there? So a couple of things I think people need to maybe be cautious of when they're in this position to get a medication is that you have to look at the side effect profiles. You need to read the labels because physicians are, to no fault of their own, that's their knee-jerk reaction. You have this symptom, you get this drug. You have anxiety, you get this. You have depression, you get this. You have both, you get this. And if that doesn't work, you get this. And if that doesn't work, we give you both. Like, that's how they work. The system works. So I encourage people to be their own steward of their health and say, do the benefits outweigh the risks? Because you do run the risk of having the same exact ailment that you're taking it for. So if you're taking anxiety medication, there is stuff in label that tells you it could actually create more of it. If you're taking a depressive medication, like a mood disorder medication, there's also stuff in the labeling that says could cause suicidal thoughts or ideation, make you more depressed. The reason why, and libido, let's talk about libido real quick, and libido, right? Because it's changing your mood chemicals, which also play a role in arousal. So people have low libido, right? And then there's circulation and all these other things. But you got to read these labels to understand the risk of you taking these products. And then you have to ask yourself, what am I really going through? What are the things that are causing my anxiety, my depression, both and or other? What are other things that I could do? Is my physician sharing with me that I'm doing cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy and accelerated response therapy and all, and EMDR? And because if they're not, and they're just putting you on a drug, chances are that's kind of a slippery slope, right? So you really got to outweigh the benefits and the risks. I think for people that are really in a bad way, if it works for them, great. But I still think you should have a plan of how to get off of those medications long term. This is not medical advice. I can't tell people what to do. But here's what I've also found, because I know this is like a long-winded answer, but here's what I also found in the literature, and as I kind of dug into this, if anyone's interested in this, you could look up Kelly Brogan, MD. She was a very renowned psychologist in New York City who used to talk a lot about this, wrote a lot about this. Has since moved on to even more stuff in a holistic profession. But here's the long and short. Some of these medications, what they do is they reuptake. So like SSRIs or serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? Dopamine, like SSNRIs. What these things are doing is they're taking the chemicals that are available and they're cycling them. Now I'm oversimplifying the science of this, but what they're doing is they're basically saying, okay, here's your serotonin, here's your dopamine, whatever. I'm going to keep cycling it around the body to keep you going, right? The problem that I've read and seen in some of this literature and research is that the longer you do that, the longer the medication recycles what's there, the more the synapses or receptor sites that help create new neurotransmitters, they burn out and die. So it's the theory of you don't lose it, you use. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I've also seen when I read some of the literature around addiction. So addicts, because they're taking things like opiates and things that create these feel-good chemicals, and they get into this like state, right? They're burning out receptor sites. So when they come off of drugs, they struggle really hard to create dopamine and serotonin because of years of addiction. So these drugs, while they're acutely getting you off the edge, could be creating a larger problem downstream that makes it really hard for you to get out of your situation. Another issue with this, the longer you take them, this is what I've read, right? The longer you take them, the harder it is when you come off of them. Because you're doing exactly what I talked about, right? So what they've seen is the longer you're on these medications and the more that you take various ones of these for long periods of time, the higher chances of relapse, of having an anxiety or depressive state, the harder it is to get out of those time over time, which is really scary. Because you almost, like the way I think about it is like, oh shit, like you basically lose almost the capability to fight out of that naturally. And if you go back and go, oh my God, I was just on this one drug years ago and now I've been on like 4 or 5 for the last 15 years. Had I known, I would have like either not taken the first one and figured out how to get out of it, or 2, taken the first one and done a shit ton of work on my psyche to never have, like, to have a better relationship with my thoughts, my experiences, my traumas, the way I operate, my diet, my nutrition, to not ever be victim of that again. But what I've seen is, like I talked about earlier, is that people want the quick fix and they don't even realize what they're about to step onto, that slippery slope, that it becomes almost like a 50-foot, deep hole you're trying to climb out of a mud wall. Like it's just difficult for people. And I experienced a little bit of this, like through my burnout situation, because I had no idea. The other thing, and I know I'm going long on this, so I'm going
No,
to
this is
stop.
great. Don't
Okay.
please
The
continue.
other, the other thing is, I lost my track of thought. You have relapse, you have depressive states, you have, there was another point I was going to make with you that I
But you were
just,
mentioning your own personal experience with burnout, and I
yeah.
don't know, maybe it's related to that.
Yeah. So when I burnt out, oh, yes. So when I was talking about compounding, okay, every single one of my issues I had in my life, I didn't even know that the medication was numbing me. And it wasn't until like years later that I had been off them that I started to actually connect the dots on it. I was like, holy shit. When I was dating this girl, she used to say to me, nothing phases you. Like you seem to not be bothered at all by this. And you don't get upset when like I'm fighting with you. You're just like you're just, it's fine. And I started to realize, I was like, that's not who I am. Like I would have normally participated in that conversation, argument, disagreement, whatever. Maybe I would get inflated a little bit. And I started to realize it was muting me. It wasn't allowing those, like those thoughts are there, but the medication doesn't allow you to like clearly feel it and see it and experience it. It buries it. And what I realized is, if the more that you do this, because this is what happened to me, this is part of how I burned out, I think. I never addressed like my traumas, my losses, like people that died in my life, things that happened bad in my life. I got jumped when I was in college. I had massive trauma from it was all these things that I never dealt with psychologically, that I was suppressing the thoughts, suppressing the emotions. And when you come off of these drugs, because they help you do that, if you have not created a safety net of doing therapy, EMDR, accelerated response therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, art therapy, I don't care therapy, any therapy to deal with your shit, what happens is it comes in like a fucking tidal wave. And you don't even know what's happening. And because you never had a relationship with your subconscious or the thoughts that pass your mind, you don't catch them. They just keep going. It all comes in at once. And this is how people experience downspouts, depressive states, panic attacks, because the body's so overwhelmed and the mind's so overwhelmed with this stuff. Now, again, I read a lot about this and I experienced it in my own life. Does it happen to everybody? Maybe not. Everyone has their own experiences, what level they've had in their life. But what I could say is major red flag caution to the wind when you take these drugs. They're not studied long term. We've seen, at least in some of the research, that it doesn't look good to what they do to the brain long term. Mental health, so anxiety, depression, ADHD, ADD, some spectrum disorders, a lot of it plays a role in the literature from the gut function, the gut health, your microbiome. And that relationship to the brain, which I think you and I talked about in the last episode, right? So how your microbiome influences your brain is very connected. And so if you're not fixing your diet and you're drinking and you're eating sugar a lot and you're eating processed foods and you're drinking lots of coffee and you're drinking, everyone kind of gets the point. If you're doing all those things, you don't have good gut function, which means you're not creating good neurotransmission, which means you're at risk to have these issues or other health issues, depending on what your genetics will tell you you may have. That's a lot, man. Like I just went through a lot there.
Yeah, it's a good segue though into nutrition and how proper nutrition or different nutrition can help with symptoms of stress and
Yeah.
anxiety. So let's get into that a little bit. We've covered that the medication route can be a slippery slope, even though it may seem enticing. But I feel like with a lot of things in society, solutions are kind of presented which allow us to continue on the same path without really changing anything about our lives, right? And this is the case with the medication that we just spoke about. It's the case with like, fast food and highly processed foods that are quick and easy to consume, but take away from our vitality and don't provide us with the right nutrition. There's obviously a big connection between stress and what we put into our body. And like you said, the gut, it's like I've heard it referred to as the second brain. Um,
Yes,
so
exactly. It's
so
called
tell
the
me,
gut access. Yeah.
right? Tell me
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah. So really, 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 this is kind of what made me dive down all this, right? Because kind of go back to the beginning real quick. Chronic stress causes anxiety, causes depression, causes burnout, causes adrenal fatigue, causes metabolic dysfunction, causes heart disease. I want people to understand that if you don't get back to the source of what's going on, none of this shit changes. You can take any medication you want in the world, but to your point, if you keep doing what you're doing, the same thing's going to happen. Definition of insanity, right?
Yeah.
So foods, most important foods, bone broth, chicken broth, beef broth, these are essential for gut function. They heal the gut. They help with neurotransmission. They help with collagen, glycine, all of these precursors to all things health. And Hippocrates, many years ago, said all disease begins in the gut. This holds true today based on the research. If you're not eating well and treating your gut well, you're going to have disease. So bone broth is one of the first things you could do. Get pasture-raised chicken, get grass-fed beef bones, chicken feet are loaded with collagen. You want the fat and you want the nutrients from the bone broth to heal your gut. I think it's obvious for people to cut out all the processed foods and all the sugar and all the alcohol. Why? Because the more you have that, the more it degrades the gut integrity. The second thing you want to look at, especially for mental health, is probiotics. So there's a lot of research around probiotics, probably last like 10 plus years, looking at certain strains like lactobacillus, reuteri, and a bunch of other ones, which I can't remember the names of because I'm not that in tune. But there's a company called Claire Labs that makes a Therabiotic Complete. It's an amazing probiotic. But I would actually recommend eating kimchi and eating sauerkraut and eating pickles, eating things that are fermented foods, because the fermented foods have naturally occurring bacteria that you would get in a tablet. And oh, by the way, more stable, more bioavailable, more natural. And when you take these probiotics, if you're taking them chronically like anything else, the literature says that you can overpopulate too much of even the good bacteria or these typical bacterias, and now you're changing the gut function again. So you want to cycle your probiotics. So instead, just eat, foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, things that are fermented. Those are amazing for mental health, and even just like attention deficits and things like that. OCD, right? The other thing is that foods like nuts and seeds help produce serotonin and some dopamine, as well as pineapple and kiwi and vitamin C foods, citrus foods, really great for a little bit of that boost of happiness. So you could and then fatty fish, right? Like anything with a good omega-3 fatty acids, extra virgin olive oil, fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, even the fat that's in your bone broth, if it's cooked low and slow and you got some good fat there and it's not oxidized, amazing for your mental health. By the way, this is why when you see people that do bodybuilding, like they compete and they get on stage at like whatever, 5%, I don't know what the heck they are, they'll tell you that even though they got to that weight, they're experiencing mental issues, stress, issues with concentrating, mood fluctuations, because they're not getting enough fat. They're not getting enough of the things that they need because they're trying to get to a low body weight. So fat is not necessarily going to make you fat. It's the right fats that keep you healthy. So that's another good thing, right? I think those are some of the core ones that I would say accessible, easy. Get walnuts, Brazil nuts, almonds, sunflowers, pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are great for serotonin. So yeah, those are some of the things that you can eat.
Cool. That's very accessible stuff for people
Yeah.
too. So it's nothing complicated. Obviously, exercise is huge, and I know this just by the way that I feel on days when I don't get to work out and have to go through my work day and whatever. Just the difference in the way that I feel after working out, calm, able to focus better. Um, what's your recommendation for like a workout protocol for somebody who might be dealing with high levels of stress and anxiety?
So I would say caution to the wind, because if you're really stressed out, the last thing your body wants is to be more stressed out. Also, what I found in my own personal experience is when I was in the burnout phase, I had no energy. I was exhausted all the time. And I was sleeping like 2, 3 hours a night if I was lucky. So what's interesting is I'd wake up from 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night and feel like I have the most energy in the world, but I couldn't physically do anything. Like I was jittery, but I couldn't physically do anything. So for people that are experiencing this, you want to do things like non-exercise activity, like just walk. Just go walking, because just walking alone won't wear you out. It won't make you super tired. So take multiple walks a day. It'll help lower your stress, and it'll help you get exercise to kind of clear your head and feel better. if you're feeling that you have strength and you have a lot of energy that you need to burn because it's pent up in you, like that anxiety's built up energy in you, then I would say do exercises like HIIT, where you can expel a lot of energy in a short amount of time and get a good bang for your buck of how you feel good, right? Getting those neurochemicals, flying after a 20-minute, 30-minute HIIT workout. Some people like to go running. If you're a runner, runner's high is a real thing.
Hmm.
So if you and you could just do a light jog where you're just kind of out of breath, but you could talk, go for a run. That's no doubt that's going to make you feel better. Any type of activity that gets you moving and out of your head is good for stress. The biggest part with mental health, at least again in my own experience and my own things that I've read, is that kind of what you said in the beginning. A lot of it is a mental issue. A lot of it is the thoughts. It's the introspective addiction of constantly being in your head thinking and trying to solve and thinking and trying to solve and your emotions and relationships to the thoughts. The more you do that, you just wear yourself out. So if you go and do something else like exercise or journaling or gardening or whatever, it's going to get you out of your head and into something else. And it's going to train the body to let go of that stress state, let go of that. Like, that's not important. Don't worry about that. I'm doing this. So any type of exercise is key. I think you should lean into the things that make you feel good, but caution to the wind, because if your cortisol is very high and you have adrenal fatigue, the last thing you want to do is burn yourself out even more and make it worse,
That's for those who are overtraining and overdoing it.
or they're like in a bad way, right? Like
Okay.
like if you're if you're more if you're I don't know how to describe it, but like if you're feeling burnt out and tired all the time and you go and do a workout that's like excessive, and after that workout you don't feel better, you feel worse, then that's a sign to tell you you're pushing the body too much.
Right.
Because the neurochemistry doesn't matter if it's physical or mental. The mental draining can have an impact on your body, your chemicals. So the goal is to stabilize that. So I guess my other advice is, and this is what I leaned into, I would do like a 20-minute, maybe 30-minute light workout at the gym, like very light, not even weights, just body weights. And I would focus more time on getting acupuncture and massages because it would help get my nervous system back online the way it's supposed to be and off of that fight or flight pattern that's wearing me out. So you really have to balance because I think people need to remember exercise, while it's good for you, is also a stressor. So
Yeah.
you got to balance like stressing the body and resting the body.
What about things like yoga or like Tai Chi that are very low impact? Um,
Amazing, amazing, amazing to do. Can't recommend it enough. You don't need to be an avid yogi, and you don't need to be a qigong master. Uh, the reason why these exercises or methods are good is because they attach the breath to movement. And the breath is one of the things that can throw you into stress states, or the stress creates bad breathing. So it helps you regulate the breathing and moving the body at the same time to kind of relax the body. So you're doing these two things at once and you're creating homeostasis. So those are amazing things to do.
cool. In your ebook, you have a bunch of natural therapies listed that I'd like to get into because some of them are, things that people would expect, like get good sleep and try to, like you mentioned, massages, acupuncture, things like that that are, I think, more commonly known. But there are a few different ones in there. Some of them we spoke about during our last conversation, like being out in nature and taking forest walks and stuff like that. And then there's other ones that maybe people haven't heard of, like sound healing, for example. I know cold showers are kind of like a trendy thing, but like, what are some of your favorite natural therapies that you think people could benefit from, and some of the less commonly known ones that people might not even know exist as an option?
Yeah. Grounding to me is, it's like the first thing I think of. Like I like grounding. So grounding for me, I think, is a really good resource for people. I think a lot of people think it's woo-woo science, but it's not. If you read the studies on what's happening in the body, um, grounding is one of the most natural healers because of the earth energy and the frequency. So it helps you vibrate at that level. So stand out in the grass 10 minutes, stare up at the sun, do whatever you want. You want to follow Huberman, fine, but it doesn't need to be sexy. Just stand in the grass, stand in the sand, lay on the grass, go in the ocean, go in a stream of water, stand on the stones next to the stream of water and feel the vibration of the water going through. Touch the water. These are all things that are grounding mechanisms, and they help your body heal, especially from stress and anxiety and depression. Going out in nature, like you said, but sometimes what I like to do is I like to rebound out in nature barefoot. So I like to stack everything. So I'll go take my shoes off, go out in a park in the middle of the woods where no one's around, and I'll just start jumping and shaking my body to discharge and ground at the same time and breathing at the same time. So I kind of stack all these things and I go out and do that. And that's easy. Do it for 10 minutes. Tell me you don't feel better after you do that, because then maybe I'm crazy, you know. So that's another one. Chanting, singing, humming. These are all things that create vibrational reactions in our body. Even tapping, and those are vagus nerve. Like they conduct in the vagus, like they tapped into the vagus nerve, and they help vagal tone, which, by the way, creates parasympathetic states, which is the rest and digest relaxation. So, hum, chant, sing. If you love singing, blast some music. Matter of fact, blast music, dance and shake and sing at the same time. Now you're really disengaging any type of gunk from your body that's keeping you stuck in an anxiety or depressed state. Sound healing. I mean, this is funny. Like, my aunt was recovering. She's a recovering addict. I remember being really young as a kid, and she used to always say weird stuff to me, like, you need to just breathe, you know, or she'd play these like melodic chimey tunes and sounds. And I'm like, man, she's crazy. Like, what is this? Fast forward 30 years later, I'm talking about it, you know. She knew what I didn't know, which is sound does the same thing. So sound has frequencies. This is why people say, you know, listen to binaural beats, or listen to Calm app at night with the melodic tones, or put on nature sounds. They all have these frequencies that help you tap into theta states, which help you reprogram your subconscious. But they also allow you to go into a frequency that grounds you and heals you, because it disengages the fight or flight patterns. So Tibetan bowls, the glass bowls, gongs, anything that's going to give those sound vibrations in a room is like, man, I'll tell you, I love those. Like, I crave going. Our retreats, we used to do them. And I'm like, man, I wish I was doing it with the guys that are in the retreat, but I'm making the sounds. It's just like, you could feel it in your body change. And people feel really good when they're done with the sound healing. So I think those are some big ones. What else could be good? I think, the easy ones like journaling, obviously. I think people don't think about that maybe, or maybe they do. Therapeutic interventions. I mentioned accelerated response therapy, and this is one that most people have not heard of. So I think it's important to probably talk about this, because it's exactly what it states: accelerated response therapy. So there's EMDR, which is a longer processing where they help, they kind of make your eyes go back and forth and process emotions and thoughts and belief systems, traumas. But the accelerated system, which is now, when I had done it, no one knew about it. It was like, there was not many locations. Now they're everywhere. So you can look that up, and that helps you release quicker. So if you want to see a therapist and you really want to resolve something fast, within minutes, I was in a session and like, I couldn't re-engage the emotion that I was trying to process before. It was gone. The thought was even gone. I couldn't really see the thought anymore. So that's another really, like, I think one, if you could find someone in your area to go to, that would help you really deal with some emotions. What else? What else to you stood out that you think people would find interesting?
Well, for example, cold showers, I've heard great things about them. For example, there's a lot of people that sing the praises of cold showers,
Yeah.
but not everybody. Like, it's a little bit controversial because, like, it does enact a little bit of stress on the body, and um So I don't know. I haven't done an excessive amount of research on it, but like, are there any things here that maybe aren't for everybody, or you can should consider, not trying out if you have specific conditions or anything like that?
So let me go to the cold thing because I want to address this real quick because I like that you brought this up. I found cold showers because of when I was in burnout. I didn't find them through social. It was way before any of this stuff came out. And I'm not saying that to say like, oh, I knew it before they. But I want to go back to that quick because the reason why cold showers work for anxiety and depression is exactly because it's a stressor, it's a shocker. So when you go in, turn the shower on, and put the cold water on your head, all you could think about in that split second is, holy shit, I'm cold, like I'm shocked, and it snaps you out of the rumination. It snaps you out of the cycling. So like what I was dealing with was like I was navigating running my businesses and like how am I going to pay for things and then how am I going to get this done and I don't have enough hours in the day and then how am I going to we're going to go buy this house. Like my mind couldn't get out of all the to-dos to solve, and when I would get in a cold shower it would immediately pull me out of it. So that's what I think cold is good for. You don't need to, admittedly, if you're in that situation, you don't need to sink yourself in a cold tub unless you want to. It's
Hmm.
up to you how bad you want to, you know, it works, but it's up to you. Things that people shouldn't do. Well, I mentioned things like I think like adaptogenics, like kava, which I think is very strong, rhodiola, St. John's wort, all these types of natural herbal remedies. I would say you got to be careful with that and talk to a physician because some of these natural adaptogenics can interfere with medications because they follow the same pathway in the body. So they can compete and you can end up with a side effect. Not saying you will, but you need to be cautious about taking things. And I actually, there are a lot of people that they hear something's good for you and they go, oh, I'm just going to go buy that and go take it. And it's good that you're taking a natural role in trying to help yourself. But if you're doing other things or you're taking other things, you just need to be a little bit more aware of, does this interact with this? Or can I take this with this? Or what will this do? Now, I'll give you an example. Um, there are certain things like tryptophan, right, that can help with neurotransmission. But if you're taking too much of something like this is just one instance, but if you're taking something like this, a supplement, and you take too much, you could actually throw yourself into a manic state. You could throw yourself into a depressed state, even with supplementation, because it's also changing neurochemistry. So people just need to be very careful with any of the things that you're going to ingest and talk to a holistic provider, naturopath, DO, integrative doctor, Chinese medicine herbalist to make sure that your concoction is being tailored to you correctly with the right doses because it is a balancing act with all this stuff. Food, no side effect or interactions, I would say, unless you have issues or allergies to food. Modalities, most of the natural modalities are not, they're not going to do anything to you. I mean, I think the one thing I would say where you need to be cautious is if you're doing some type of trauma release types of therapy with the sound and I'm being specific, like they're guiding you through trauma releases or emotional releases. Just know that things may come up that you may not even know are there. Things that you've suppressed in your subconscious that could show up. And I've had this happen to me, so I think it's important to make note to people. If you don't have the safety net of knowing how to breathe and learning your relationship to thoughts, or having a guide in that session that can walk you through the emotional discharge so you can process the emotion, because you do want to, the body wants to release it, but if you don't know how to, then you can get stuck. So you want someone to guide you through it, make sure you know that that may happen, kind of be aware. Um, so I think those are the big ones. But the rebounding, the sound healing, the vibrating, the chanting, all this stuff it's nourishing. You don't have to worry too much about you know side effect profiles, unless you have bad knees or a bad back or something, and you just
Right.
gotta be careful with it. But I think that's my honest answer. I don't think there's too many things that are bad. I would just say anything you're putting in your body is what you got to be careful of.
On the note of that trauma release idea, it just speaks to me about how sometimes we're so unaware of the things that are going on in our brains, right? Like it's amazing to me
Mm-hmm.
how things can come up that you haven't thought about in years and didn't even realize was, hanging out in there, and it just comes to the surface. Why is that? Like, how much do you know about that mechanism of the brain, and like what are your thoughts about that?
So the brain has a primal component which the amygdala is connected to, and your amygdala is your fight or flight mechanism. It's part of the fight or flight mechanism that makes you run, fight, or flee. And it's actually a natural occurring process. It's supposed to happen. So I want people to think about it like this. If we took ourselves back a couple hundred years ago before we were civilized and modernized, we were living in huts, we were living in camp, like, kind of constructed, communities, and we were exposed to the wild. So we were exposed to wild animals. We were hunting wild animals for food. We were experiencing warfare with other tribes. So this fight or flight pattern is supposed to happen. It's supposed to happen in a state like that because it's saying, hey, we've got to preserve the body. We got to rescue ourselves. We got to save ourselves. How do we do that in this instance? And within a split millisecond, it's going to process and go, stay and fight, freeze and, I don't know, freeze and fall down, whatever, or run. It's going to know what to do because it processes the experience it's had previously and knows the equation of what to do. The problem is, I think in our modern world, people think that this is not normal. They're like, something's wrong with me. I have anxiety. I have panic attacks. It's like, well, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. The medical world wants you to think you're broken with symptoms and put you on a drug. And I mean that with no malintent, but that's unfortunately the case. Is the storyline is you have a genetic problem, you have a neurotransmitter imbalance. Okay, can you test neurotransmitters? Not really well, even when you do urine ones or whatever. Oh, and do your neurotransmitters stay the same? Nope, they don't stay static. So what do you mean have an imbalance, right? So I think people think they're broken by the messages from the system, and then they buy into, I'm broken, I need a drug. This mechanism is normal. Where it becomes abnormal is that our modern lives have created it triggering for no good apparent reason. I got a bad email, fight or flight. I got a text that said something, fight or flight. I'm getting pinged, emailed, called, meetings, pick up my kids, fight or flight. This is what I was saying about chronic states. We're creating it through a mental process, and it's abnormal. That process that's built into us is supposed to be triggered from the ancestral things that we would experience. And what happens is we get stuck because we don't even realize that that's going on. The other thing that is important is that people think that the brain can't be changed. Like, this is who I am. My genetics say that I have anxiety, depression, OCD, bipolarism, schizophrenia. Well, maybe schizophrenia is a little bit more challenging, but I have these things. I can't change them. Wrong. The brain's malleable. You can change the brain, albeit it's hard. But if you're meditating and breathing and reprogramming the mind and learning how to deal with the thoughts and emotions and learning that they're not all real. Like every stupid thought you have is just a thought. It's just a stupid thought. It doesn't mean anything. There's no weight to any of this stuff. So don't give it any meaning, These are things that you could do to train it to then help understand when the brain can decide real threat, not real threat. And it's triggering the not real threat, but I know how to deal with it, right? Because at the bottom of that cascade, at the bottom of the HPA axis, it's called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It's the cascade that runs all the way down the body that triggers fight or flight. And at the very bottom of that cascade, there's a neurochemical called cortisol, a hormone, called cortisol. And cortisol is what wreaks havoc on the body. It's what starts to throw off all the homeostasis, the biochemicals, the neurotransmitters, metabolic control, breathing, respiration rates, and this is where disease ensues. So I hope I answered kind of in a simple way of how the brain works. And like, I guess the biggest takeaway for people is like, you're not broken. If you're going through this and you're like sitting in your home by yourself and you think there's something wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with you. The brain, actually, let me say this, because I learned this myself going through my own shit. When you experience anxiety, when you experience depression, when you experience burnout, when you experience OCD, when you experience bipolarism, these are not diseases. They're symptoms to tell you the body is saying something's wrong. You're not addressing it. Something's wrong. And then your job is to look at those signs and become a detective and go, how did I get here? What things did I do to get here? Am I drinking too much? Too much alcohol? Am I doing too many drugs? Am I eating too much sugar? Am I not dealing with my stress? Am I not sleeping too much? Am I not dealing with my emotion? Right? These all these contributing factors that make the body go, whoa, dude, I don't feel good. This is my sign to tell you, like, it can't talk to you. So how's it going to speak? Symptoms.
Right.
This is happening. Look at me. Look at me. This is going on. So it's not a neurotransmitter imbalance. It's not a blood sugar imbalance. It's there's something going on that you're doing that's creating it, and you need to go back and figure out how to turn it off. You know, that's I think important for people to understand. You have control over this. You may need someone to help you. I'm not saying do it by yourself, but you can change it. And when you do change it on your own, you're more resilient in the future when you go through trauma, loss, job loss, financial crisis, relationship crisis, whatever, to know exactly how to deal with it.
Why do you think society has evolved this way, where stress has become such a pervasive issue for us? And why do you think it's almost normalized now, where you ask anybody and they'll tell you, "Oh, I'm stressed about this, I'm stressed about that, my job, my wife, my kids, with X, Y, Z." Why are we this way?
My opinion, my opinion is our society has prioritized wealth over health. That is it's the root of all evil for us. We're obsessed with money. We're obsessed with success, which, oh, by the way, means we have a lot of money and also material things like cars and this and that, whatever, big houses. We have become so fixated on life's journey being attached, life's success journey of living a good life directly attached to monetary success. And what happens is, again, my opinion, is that health comes at the very bottom because they'll do anything at all costs to achieve wealth. Companies, people know this. They want you to work, and they want you to work long hours, most of them. And they want you to sometimes do 2, 3, 4 jobs of other people. They are using you as a conduit to make money. Every business is a business to make money. Healthcare is a business. Big ag is a business. Big pharma is a business. So my opinion is that we have become addicted to this, and we have forgotten that the most important thing is health and family. No one gives a shit how much money you have when you die. I was just talking to somebody the other day. Why corporations do what they do. Because guess what? Those people also can't take the money with them when they die. The countries that want power over other countries, why? Why do you want more land, more power? Because you can't take it when you die. We all die. So I just think we've really deprioritized what it means to be human, and we're fixated on money and material shit, so much so that we forgot. And when I go back to Italy, when I go back to Europe, it's a constant reminder for me. Because when I look at those people, people say Sicilians are lazy. In Italian, they say pigri, pigri, pigro. They lazy. Maybe. But I think they also know the magic sauce because here's how they live. They worry about today. How much do I need for today? How much food do I need for today? And when I go get that, I can go do what I want to do the rest of my day. Go relax, have a coffee, spend time with friends, play cards, take a walk, spend time with my family. They're not consumed by wealth necessarily. This is why they live longer. This is why they have less diseases in these areas. So I think we prioritize money, we put health at the bottom, and then we fight to use all the money we made to get health back because we realize at the end of it, oh shit, like I can't do anything unless I'm healthy. You know, I
Yeah, the
can't tell
bitter
you how many
irony.
people. What's that?
It's the bitter irony of like using the wealth you've accumulated to then try to cure the diseases that you've developed.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And honestly, I actually think Americans are lazy. And here's why. We have automated everything. Why do automations happen? Why are we obsessed with automations? More money, faster. More productivity, faster. Oh, you don't have to do that anymore, so you can work more hours. We took care of that for you. You don't need to spend time over there. You can go do this. Order your food. It'll be delivered to your house. You don't have to make lunch and sit down and try to eat. Sit in front of your computer. Let them send it to you, some shit food, so you can keep working in front of your laptop for us. Oh, you don't need to make a coffee. Just go through the drive-through. Spend $6 to buy a coffee so we can make money and you can go back to work and stay stressed and what. The whole system is just so freaking broken that, but it's all so you can work more, make more. That's the priority. Work more, make more. And that's why we're sick. And then every other system that's been built, healthcare, food, ag, right? All these things that have been built, they're built around that same model. Convenience, fast, profitable, so you can go and do your job. Why would you want to cook dinner for your family? Why would you want to do that? Just order out. Just buy these TV dinners. Just have the groceries shipped to you so you don't have to go do that. You can do another hour of work. Make more money for yourself. It's so, like, I don't even know whoever listens to this, if they see it like I see it or see what I'm saying, but the minute you start peeling this shit back, like your mind starts to go, oh my God, like I can't unsee it.
Everything leads back to that.
We're obsessed with it so much that it makes us sick.
Well, I hope that whoever is listening to this benefits in some way. I know I have. I need constant reminders and this it's not even necessarily that it's news to me, because a lot of people do address these issues and talk about it pretty openly. Uh, you know, some people are more aware of it than others, and I think it's easy to go through your life with a blindfold on, kind of like not realizing what's actually happening around you. And we all have our own lives and our own stuff to deal with, and you know, it's not easy just to get by just in a basic sense in this world. But I think some of the tools that you spoke about today can be helpful. I hope people use them and take them seriously and take their health into their own hands. Because even our previous conversation was largely about that. It's like how to be your own doctor, how to take your health into your own hands, because nobody else will do that for you. It's really all up to us.
It
And that
is.
goes for mental health just as much as physical health, and they're intimately connected.
We have more medications and more therapies available now more than ever for mental health, but yet the numbers are growing. I want people to think about that because it goes back to exactly what you said in closing. You are the best resolution to your problem. Not drugs, not a doctor, unfortunately. You are the source of the problem and you're the resolution to it. Because it's clear that we're not, as much money as we make, as much as the healthcare system has, as many products as we make, we're still having, it's growing. It's becoming more of a problem. That tells you that it's not a drug problem. It's a lifestyle, societal, the way we live problem. You got to
Yeah.
deal with your shit. You got to deal with your
I, I
shit.
I think the other important thing to recognize too, and it's a good message to share just to wrap things up also, is that we cannot walk through life as victims either. You know,
No,
like nobody's like you said, nobody is doing this to us. It may be the world that we live in, but ultimately, we're free to live life the way that we want to, and we're responsible for the way that we treat ourselves. So
100%. I don't know if I wrote that too, but like I have the similar thought, right? It's like you see a lot of social media influencers, targeting pharma, like big pharma, saying they're the enemy, they're the enemy, they're the enemy. But to your point, I think the very same way. Nobody said you need to go take their stuff. They're not forcing you to go take their stuff necessarily. You have a choice. And if you choose not to, then they're not in business from you. They're not making money from you. But they're not the cause. Like you said, that's victim mentality saying that pharma is making you do it. They're not making you do anything. Now, do they want people to? Sure, they make profits. But they're not telling you to do it necessarily. You're doing it. And you have a choice to do otherwise. And this goes back to what I said about people being lazy. The problem is we've conditioned people not to do the work in any part of their life. So everything seems so hard to do, but the only resolution is to do the work. That's the dead honest truth. Do the work, and you won't have to buy their pharmaceuticals. You know?
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I hope conversations like this help to raise awareness and kind of get people thinking and acting differently. And I'm seeing more and more of them. So, I think as a society, we're getting there. It may take a while, but these conversations are taking place, and that's important.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think if anyone's listening that's depressed or anxious, go serve your community. Go help somebody else. Even if you think I'm not fit to go help anybody, I'm done. Go help somebody else because what you'll find is serving others is one of the best medicines for you. So, if anything at all, join a church, help the church, go to a community thing, go serve somebody, help somebody, whatever. Go do whatever you can to serve somebody else, and you'll see that you'll immediately feel different.
Absolutely. That's a great way to wrap it up. Thanks so
Awesome.
much, Rich. It's always great speaking to you, and I can't wait for
Likewise,
the next one.
likewise, man. Thanks again.